Fredo's first mental disorder is an inferiority complex. This disorder manifests in a constant, painful feeling of inadequacy to family and social standards. Fredo grew up in the shadow of his legendary father, Vito Corleone, who was not just the head of a mafia empire but also a moral authority for the Italian community in New York. His brothers Sonny and Michael also stood out, Sonny with his aggressiveness and masculinity, Michael with his intellect and strategic thinking. As the middle child, Fredo often felt deprived of attention and recognition. In Puzo's novel, it's mentioned that in childhood he was sickly and weak, which only intensified his sense of inferiority. In the film, this is evident in numerous scenes, for example, at Connie's wedding in the first part, where Fredo tries to appear important by flirting with guests but actually looks comical and unauthoritative. Psychologists interpret this as imposter syndrome, where a person constantly doubts their worth, comparing themselves to others and feeling jealousy. For Fredo, this leads to an internal conflict. He wants to be part of the family business but fears failure. Jealousy toward Michael, who becomes the new Don, becomes the catalyst for betrayal in the second part. This disorder is deeply rooted in childhood, when Fredo saw his father praising his other sons while perceiving him as weak. In real life, similar complexes often arise in families with high expectations, where a child doesn't meet the ideals, and they lead to depression or self-destruction. How does Fredo try to cope with this disorder? He actively uses his emotional warmth, empathy, and desire to please everyone, which are his strong traits. Fredo often acts as the peacemaker and joker in the family, trying to win love and recognition through small but sincere services. For example, in the first part, he organizes entertainment for guests at the wedding, laughs, dances, and tries to be the center of attention in a positive way to compensate for his sense of inferiority. In Las Vegas, he manages a hotel and tries to appear as an important businessman. This is an attempt to create an illusion of success where he feels valuable. This compensation strategy is classic for people with an inferiority complex. They try to outdo themselves through social roles or hedonism. Fredo tries to channel his pain into positivity, becoming the nice guy of the family, loved for his warmth rather than strength. However, this often comes across as superficial and temporary, because deep inside, the complex doesn't disappear. He continues to feel inferior, and this leads to outbursts of jealousy. The second disorder is an anxiety disorder or panic attacks, which can be classified as generalized anxiety disorder. Fredo easily succumbs to intense fear and tension, manifesting in physical reactions, trembling, crying, paralysis of action. A key scene in the first part is the assassination attempt on Vito, where Fredo can't pull himself together. He falls to his knees, sobs, and doesn't shoot at the attackers, demonstrating a classic panic attack with hyperventilation and emotional collapse. Psychological analyses indicate that this is related to the traumatic experience of growing up in a mafia environment, where violence is everyday, but Fredo lacks the mental resilience to cope with it. Unlike his brothers, he isn't hardened by war or business. His body reacts to stress with cowardice, avoidance of conflicts, and passivity, making him unreliable in crises. It's similar to post-traumatic stress disorder, but in Fredo, it's more chronic anxiety, exacerbated by family pressure. In Puzo's novel, Fredo is described as nervous from childhood, and this leads to constant fear of failure or rejection. In real life, similar disorders often arise in people with low self-esteem in stressful environments and manifest in avoidance of responsibility. How does Fredo try to cope with this? He resorts to avoidance strategies and social adaptability, hiding behind charm and light-heartedness. Instead of directly confronting danger, Fredo tries to distract himself through hedonism and social interactions. He organizes parties, surrounds himself with women, alcohol, and entertainment to temporarily calm his anxiety. He also seeks protection from family or loved ones, trying to be close to them to feel safer and less anxious. After the assassination attempt on his father, we see a scene where Sonny takes control of the critical situation. As it's a matter of the entire family's survival, Sonny consults with the family's combat members. Fredo is not in this group. Sonny takes care of him, which is further confirmed in the scene of Vito's return from the hospital home, where Sonny tells Vito that Fredo will go to Las Vegas under the protection of Don Francesco. This strategy is typical for people with anxiety disorders. They use social support and distraction, but without professional help, it remains superficial. The third disorder is an impulsive disorder or elements of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, combined with a compulsive pursuit of pleasure, hedonism. In Puzo's novel, Fredo is described as a nervous from childhood, and this leads to constant fear of failure or rejection. In real life, similar disorders often arise in people with low self-esteem in stressful environments and manifest in avoidance of responsibility. How does Fredo try to cope with this? He resorts to avoidance strategies and social adaptability, hiding behind charm and light-heartedness. Instead of directly confronting danger, Fredo tries to distract himself through hedonism and social interactions. He organizes parties, surrounds himself with women, alcohol, and entertainment to temporarily calm his anxiety. He also seeks protection from family or loved ones, trying to be close to them to feel safer and less anxious. After the assassination attempt on his father, we see a scene where Sonny takes control of the critical situation. As it's a matter of the entire family's survival, Sonny consults with the family's combat members. Fredo is not in this group. Sonny takes care of him, which is further confirmed in the scene of Vito's return from the hospital home, where Sonny tells Vito that Fredo will go to Las Vegas under the protection of Don Francesco. This strategy is typical for people with anxiety disorders. They use social support and distraction, but without professional help, it remains superficial. The third disorder is an impulsive disorder or elements of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, combined with a compulsive pursuit of pleasure, hedonism. Fredo acts impulsively, without considering consequences. He quickly marries a woman who mocks him, like Deanna in the second part, gets involved with numerous women, plays gambling games. In the film, this is evident in his betrayal of Michael. He acts out of jealousy and resentment, not calculating that it will lead to death. Psychologists interpret this as a lack of executive brain functions, possibly due to childhood illnesses. In the novel, Fredo had pneumonia in childhood, which could have affected development or upbringing where discipline wasn't instilled. This makes him vulnerable to manipulation. Enemies easily exploit his impulses. In real life, similar disorders are often accompanied by addictions, and in Fredo, this is seen in his womanizing, obsession with women, and gambling. How does Fredo try to cope with this? He tries to channel his impulsiveness into a desire to be useful and initial loyalty to the family. Fredo directs his impulses toward small but positive actions. For example, in the second part, we're shown Michael's memories where Fredo is the only one who supported his choice to join the army. He also uses harmony as a barrier, avoids conflicts, trying to please everyone so that impulses don't destroy relationships. This is an attempt at self-control through social roles, as in cognitive therapy, where impulses are redirected to constructive purposes. However, this often fails because deep emotions prevail, and impulsiveness leads to fatal mistakes. The fourth disorder is dependent personality disorder, in which a person is submissive, seeks approval, and cannot be independent. Fredo always depends on stronger figures, his father, brothers, mother, or even enemies. He doesn't make decisions on his own. In the novel, he's described as the one who needs guidance. In the second part, this leads to betrayal. Fredo believes manipulators like Johnny Ola and Hyman Roth because he seeks recognition outside the family, thinking he'll become important. Psychological interpretations point to middle child syndrome, where Fredo feels dependent on authorities, which intensifies passive aggression. He resents but doesn't confront openly. In real life, this often arises in dysfunctional families where a child doesn't develop autonomy. How does Fredo try to cope with this? He resorts to emotional sensitivity and a desire for harmony, trying to build relationships through empathy. Fredo pleases everyone to maintain dependence as a protection. For example, he's tolerant of his wife Deanna, who publicly mocks him, trying to preserve the marriage. The fifth disorder is depressive traits or elements of chronic depression, combined with imposter syndrome. Fredo accumulates failures, leading to constant remorse, self-destruction, and emotional exhaustion. In the first part, after the assassination attempt on his father, he falls into despair. At the end of the second part, after the betrayal is exposed, this repeats. In Puzo's novel, Fredo is described as sad and disappointed in himself. In real life, similar states often accompany inferiority complexes. How does Fredo try to cope with this? He uses lightheartedness and the pursuit of pleasure as escapism. In Las Vegas, he organizes holidays for Michael, trying to find joy in society and temporarily lift his mood. Despite all attempts at compensation and avoidance, most of his mental problems remained unresolved, which became the cause of the tragedy, his murder on Michael's orders. First, the inferiority complex was never overcome. Fredo constantly felt inferior, and his attempts to prove his worth through external recognition or betrayal only worsened the situation, leading to complete isolation from the family and deep resentment that didn't disappear even before death. Second, the anxiety disorder remained dominant and destructive. In all crises, like the assassination attempt on Vito or on Michael in Cuba, Fredo panicked, couldn't act decisively, which made him an unreliable ally and led to fatal betrayal because fear overcame rationality. Third, the impulsive disorder was not controlled in anything. His impulsive decisions, like a quick marriage, gambling, or collaboration with enemies out of jealousy, became fatal because Fredo never learned to calculate consequences. Fourth, the dependent personality disorder remained unchanged. Fredo never became independent, always seeking approval from stronger ones, which made him an eternal victim of manipulations and led to the betrayal that cost him his life. Finally, depressive traits accumulated to a critical point without discharge. Remorse after the betrayal brought no redemption or change. His story is a lesson about how unresolved disorders destroy lives, especially in a toxic environment. If Fredo lived in an ordinary world, perhaps his warmth and sensitivity would have made him happy, but in the Corleone family, it became a curse.